Bienvenidos al 12º conversatorio de la Asociación de Conventions and Visitors Burós de Latinoamérica y el Caribe. Hoy nos encontramos transmitiendo desde el Centro Cultural Julio Leparc, en la provincia de Mendoza, Argentina. Les contamos que Julio Leparc es un artista que trascendió las fronteras de Mendoza hacia el mundo y sus obras han sido expuestas en los museos más importantes alrededor de todo el mundo. Julio ya hoy tiene 91 años, es un exponente muy importante de la cultura artística, ya que sus obras trascendieron los estilos op art, el estilo conceptual y el estilo experimental. Quería contarles un poquito esto porque nos han brindado los estudios desde Meca Live para poder transmitir desde este hermoso centro cultural, que ya estamos prontos trabajando para las reaperturas en nuestro sector de la industria de reuniones y las industrias de los espectáculos artísticos. Hoy contarles que nos acompañan invitados que para nosotros es un honor contar con su presencia en un título que nuclea algo que todos anhelamos, inspirando la grandeza con Destinations International. Hoy en un contexto difícil para nuestra industria, pero donde nos encanta poder contar con las presentaciones de Don Welsh, de Melissa Sherry y de Andreas Westenborg, quienes nos van a transmitir todo lo que a nivel global esta organización puede acompañarnos. También agradecer a nuestros facilitadores, como siempre a Graciela Padoín, a Ana María Vizcasillas y muy especialmente hoy a Eduardo Chaillo, que es el artífice de poder tener el honor de contar con estos oradores de lujo. No quiero dejar de transmitir nuestro agradecimiento, como siempre, a nuestros sponsors que nos acompañan de manera permanente, a Destinations International, a ABTM Américas, a Monterrey Oficina de Convenciones y Visitantes, a Unedestinos Brasil, a José Cuervo, Truly 360 by Google, a Meca Live, que hoy nos brinda toda la estructura para poder seguir transmitiendo estos conversatorios y día a día desafía la tecnología para poder acompañarnos, a Park Hyatt Mendoza, que también ha sido sede de nuestros conversatorios, también muy especialmente queríamos agradecer a dos empresas que hoy nos acompañan desde distintos lugares de Latinoamérica. A Liam, con LAC Traducciones Simultáneas y Servicios, que nos está brindando su acompañamiento con interpretación simultánea desde San Pablo, Brasil. Y también a iSimultánea, quienes nos están acompañando a través de la presencia de Aurea y Alma, y están haciendo su interpretación desde México City, desde la Ciudad de México. Así que muchas gracias a ellos, gracias por el acompañamiento, gracias por confiar en la Asociación de CVB'S LATAM y el Caribe. Y bueno, y a continuación les voy a presentar a nuestros oradores del día de hoy. Don Welsh es presidente y CEO de Destinations International. Siguiente placa, gracias. Don es ejecutivo experimentado del sector del turismo con más de 35 años de experiencia en la industria y se desempeña actualmente como presidente y CEO de Destinations International. Desde que se incorporó a esta asociación en marzo del 2016, Walsh ha implementado una realineación estratégica a través de un compromiso renovado para entender mejor las necesidades de los miembros y así enfocarse a desarrollar los recursos que ellos mismos han determinado como esenciales para el éxito de sus organizaciones. Dentro de esta lista de prioridades se destacan el desarrollo profesional, la certificación, acreditación, mejores prácticas y cabildeo. Actos seguidos se han desarrollado con productos y servicios escalables y oportunidades para cada una de estas necesidades. También antes de unirse a Destinations International, se desempeñó como presidente y CEO de Shows Chicago, la organización de destino oficial para esa ciudad, y en este cargo fue responsable de comercializar el producto Destino Chicago para viajeros de negocios y turistas en los mercados regionales, nacionales e internacionales. Durante sus 5 años con Shows Chicago, Welsh y su equipo desarrollaron e implementaron iniciativas que contribuyeron al logro de resultados estelares para la industria de la hospitalidad, reportando en 2014 un año récord en cuanto a número de visitantes en Chicago, 50,2 millones de visitantes, el mayor gasto y generación de impuestos en la historia, así como 14 meses consecutivos de aumento continuo en cuartos noche ocupados. Welch también ocupó el puesto de CEO para las oficinas de convenciones y visitantes de Indianápolis y de Seattle. Antes de entrar en el rol directivo en organizaciones de destino, Welch se desempeñó como vicepresidente senior de Westin Hostels en su sede corporativa y ocupó altos cargos de liderazgo en la propia cadena Westin Hostels and Resorts, así como de Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company and MGM Grand Hotel Casino Las Vegas. Grand Hotel Casino Las Vegas. La siguiente. Presentamos a Melissa. Melissa Sherry es actualmente directora de operaciones de Destinations International y responsable del desarrollo y la ejecución de la estrategia general de marketing y comunicaciones para promover la misión de la asociación, elevar la marca y generar conciencia sobre su impacto y así avanzar en el éxito de la industria de marketing de destinos globalmente. Antes de unirse a Destinations International, Melissa fue vicepresidente senior de marketing y turismo cultural en Shows Chicago. Durante su mandato de 4 años en la organización de marketing de destino oficial de la ciudad, dirigió las estrategias de mercado nacionales e internacionales, incluidos todos los esfuerzos para la estrategia de marca, marketing integrado, investigación, publicidad, publicaciones oficiales y otros, sitios web, redes sociales y marketing de eventos. Los 20 años de experiencia de Melissa en la industria incluyen puestos anteriores en el Museo de Historia de Chicago y en el Consejo de Turismo y Convenciones de Los Ángeles, entonces conocido como Oficina de Convenciones y Visitantes de Los Ángeles. Y también tenemos el honor de contar con la presencia de Andreas Weisenborg, quien, habiendo descubierto el mundo de las organizaciones de destino por una solicitud de pasantía aleatoria para Visit Baltimore, entonces conocida como la Asociación de Convenciones y Visitantes del área de Baltimore, Andreas Weisenborg comenzó una carrera inesperada en la industria de la hospitalidad que le tatuó para siempre una pasión continua hacia la actividad turística. Weisenborg pasó por lo menos 11 años con Visit Baltimore, ayudando con sus sistemas de investigación, tecnología e información en toda la organización. En 2017 se sumó a la asociación en nombre de una iniciativa de Destinations International Foundation, como un especialista en investigación dedicada para Destinations International. Bienvenidos, welcome, y disculpen porque mi inglés es muy básico. Don, te damos la palabra.
Savannah, greetings from Washington, D.C., everyone. And I want to thank you very much for that lovely and kind introduction of myself, Melissa, and Andreas. And we are thrilled to be here with you today. So thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute pleasure to be joining you today from our offices here in Washington, D.C. I actually came into my office today to make sure that this map directly behind me clearly showcased the excitement about today's call, and I want to thank you all for taking time to be on this call today. I also, in addition to thanking Silvana, I want to thank Eduardo for his continued support of the organization, and of course, Ana Maria. We've been working with Ana Maria since many of us got here close to 5 years ago, and we thank you for her support. These have clearly been some very, very challenging times for our industry around the world. And many of you know Destinations International, but if you're not, we have over 600 plus destination organizations in 13 countries around the world. So we do get a chance to have frequent conversations with our members. And needless to say, the conversations, in some cases, it's business as usual. And the work that you're going to hear from Andreas and Melissa shortly, it is reflective of those times. But clearly during the challenging times, it presents some unique circumstances and opportunities for us. And I am so proud of the work of our industry, of the resilience. I know that we've all faced challenges in the past, whether they've been acts of terrorism or whether they've been natural disasters. But I think we would all agree that the pandemic, COVID-19, has been the equalizer for the industry and for the world. And we hope and pray that a vaccine is found soon, and we hope and pray that the medical and scientific community will continue to make the progress that we've seen recently. And we do believe there is optimism. some optimism for the future. And with that in mind, we plan ahead. The work that I'm most proud of really has to do with many of the webinars and research pieces we've done really since the pandemic, which started in all essence about March 19th. And I don't know how many webinars we've done, but they have been real time, they have been pressing, and they've been presenting information and data to our members that they want and need during these times. I think the thing I'm most impressed with is the continued information sharing that is being provided by every member around the world in terms of how they can help. And that inspires the team and I. I know you're going to get a great presentation from Andreas today. He's got about a 30-minute presentation for you. But I wish we could all see you face to face, but in the absence of that, we become very versed and very proficient in terms of being on webinars and communicating via electronic. And I don't see that changing. We are encouraged by some of the things we're seeing around the world. It seems like these concentric circles that were together for so long and things we took for granted, of getting on an airplane and flying from Sao Paulo to New York and not even think about it, or from London to LA, or from here to Beijing. We never even thought about those things. And I think clearly this has given us all an opportunity to reflect on how vital tourism and meetings are for our respective destinations, our countries, and those we represent. So we're working very hard on it. The collaboration I've seen between all the industry partners, whether it's the hotel community, whether it's the meetings industry organizations, whether it's the facilities, everybody's really coming together to address this with the brightest, most talented minds we could do. So there's where I find my inspiration, and I think the team finds that as well. So with this in mind, I just wanted to, I hope you're all doing as best as you can during these challenging times. We really would love to be able to see you if the meeting were taking place next week in Chicago. I know we would have seen many of you in Chicago and we would have celebrated together. But in the absence of that, I'm hoping we can see you virtually and share a lot of the great work that's being done by our industry, by our partners, and many of you on the call. So again, my just brief welcome. Silvana, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Melissa Cherry. He's been working feverishly in addition to all of her other responsibilities to get ready for the annual convention next week in Chicago. Now we'll take him virtually. So thank you.
Thank you, Don. And welcome everyone, and thank you for having us today. We very much enjoy being able to welcome you all and give you some great information on things that have been going on at Destination. I'm just going to share with you guys a few informational details on the annual convention that we have coming up next week, and also some educational opportunities that'll also be happening over the course of the summer. And then after that, I will turn it over to Andreas, who will share a great presentation on our community shared value and tourism lexicon. So as you may know, we are scheduled to have our virtual convention July 14th and 15th next week. This is just to give you a glance at the agenda. Our overall content theme is inspiring greatness. So we're very excited. These sessions, though we had to very much look at the program post-COVID to make sure the content was relevant, we made sure we did the heavy lifting to do that and making sure that the content was going to serve as an inspiration to those that attended. We'll have over exactly 24 educational sessions. We're really excited. This year we have, and we have in our face-to-face meetings had executive roundtables, but we'll be able to do that. This will be an invite-only segment where we'll look at different sessions that will talk about everything from funding, reimagining the CVB, organizational culture, insights and data trends, all of those very specific to the CEO level. In addition to that, there's some great new content that will be coming and being released. There's going to be a new study called Organization Next that will talk about key strategies and best practices for CVBs. We will have a special 75-minute lab from Expedia that will look at, again, trends and insights and research as it pertains to recovery. We will also have some great industry panels. Don will lead a session on why race matters. We will also have a session led by Jack Johnson, our Chief Advocacy Officer, talking about really what new funding models will look like for CVBs of the future. And finally, we'll have 3 amazing keynote presentations from Carrie Lorenz, our Global All-Stars, which will be presented by Miles Partnership, in which they'll have an international panel, and also Mitch Album as our closing keynote. We will also have several networking opportunities. So we'll kick off the morning with a welcome coffee. We'll have breaks. We will also have virtual happy hours. A lot of that navigation within that virtual environment will bounce between our live sessions and Zoom chat rooms. And we're working hard to make sure that we also have a special chat room for this group, for those attendees during the happy hour. So you guys can definitely connect there as well. In the middle of the day, just similarly to the exhibit show, trade show that we've had every year for annual, we will have our marketplace of ideas, but yet virtually. There, attendees will be able to go in and visit virtual booths. They'll be able to chat one-on-one with those exhibitors, make appointments. In addition to that, we will have on-demand 15-minute Evolve and Elevate thought leadership sessions that will be presented by some of our partners that will be in the marketplace of ideas. And then finally, as part of the agenda and a resource, we will have a document library that will have various presentations from our speakers as they are actually presented or post-presentation, different thought leadership resources that we're working on at Destinations International, and also other resources from our partners that will be organized for people to peruse, download, print, etc. In addition to that, we also just wanted to share that we have extended a special rate for the LATAM members to, member or not, of being able to also get the US $199 membership rate. So we're very, very excited about that. One thing we have coming up following our annual convention on Thursday, July 23rd, is our kind of virtual marketing communication summit. Here we will talk about the next normal. So what is really happening? How do we look at marketing in the future? So we'll have an opening keynote with a marketing futurist, Matthew Sweezy, who is part of Salesforce, transitioning to a CVB model, looking at the data. There's a ton of data out there in terms of what tourists are doing, sentiment, et cetera. So we definitely want to dig into that deeper with some of our experts. We'll have conversations around diversity, inclusion, meeting and conventions, public relations, and also looking at how to balance visitor and local sentiment. And then finally, I just want to remind everyone that a lot of our educational opportunities are on our online learning center. So they're there on demand. If you were not able to make a past webinar, they're there with the resources of the presentation and also the recording. So I'm going to keep mine short so I can immediately turn it over to Andreas. And Andreas, I'm going to stop sharing so you can take it over. Thank you, everyone, and look forward to our discussion afterwards.
Your microphone is not working.
Can I be heard now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for having me today. I wanted to give a big also thank you for Eduardo. Eduardo saw me last week presenting on this matter and thought kind enough of me to include me on this. So I wanted to give a big thank you for that. So as you heard today, I'm going to talk a little bit about our tourism lexicon and essentially becoming a community shared value. And so I want to start that off. So my name is Andreas Weisenborn. I do research and advocacy for the association on behalf of the Destinations International Foundation. For today, really our starting point, I think to give a good base for everyone is really, I always like to sort of describe my title. When people hear the word research, I think they have a fundamental understanding of what research is. They understand sometimes the science or the methodology behind it. But advocacy, that's a definition that I see everyone's got a sort of their own. And I always think it's important I start this off with what I believe mine is. And that is that I believe advocacy is a person, place, thing, or even set of ideas that is willing to defend, articulate, or put forth a set of beliefs or whatnot towards, a set of values, a set of ideals, or an ideology. And I think it's actually important to sort of start that off with what ours is. And that essentially is what we call our cornerstone. Now, for this audience, I'm not expecting everyone to read the entirety of it, but really the last paragraph is most important. What we fundamentally believe is that destination promotion is for the benefit and well-being of everyone in your community. It is a common good. It's a public good. If you're Canadian, it's a crown good. I'm going to try to translate it. It's bien publico, bien mayor, bien común. Hopefully I got that right. That this is something that builds the quality of place for your residents in your community and fundamentally creates quality of life for them. And that is essentially our cornerstone. And to get to that point, what I'm really articulating is essentially becoming a community shared value. Really, these are a set of beliefs that we as a society have that understand that these are the things that we need to fundamentally elevate ourselves next, to bring our society forward, to better ourselves. We understand that clean water makes us healthier. We understand that a invested medical system keeps us healthier, keeps us well, keeps our being. We understand that teachers help keep us educated. Firefighters keep us safe. These are values that we as a society understand not only help us in our generation, but they're an investment towards the next. So what I'm trying to articulate today is that I believe that destination promotion, destination marketing and articulation is also a community shared value. It is an investment into your community that creates quality of place that reverberates not only in the present, but also the future. So in order to really fundamentally be a community shared value, you have to really answer 4 questions. The first is essentially, what is the community need? And if anything, this pandemic has taught us more so than ever is that we are in a globalized world, right? No longer can a disease be isolated in one part of the world. It affects us all. The same is true of other methods of our life, commerce, moving, all those type of facets of it are now, we're all connected. And in the same time, we're also competing in the sense of competing for the world share as it relates to residents and visitors, right? We're all competing against each other to grab a hold of that little part of the earth to have hopefully residents and visitors join us, right? And that really is the fundamental need. We all have responsibility that we are there to promote and advocate for our piece of the earth, our community, our perspective on it, right? This is how sometimes the smallest little destination organization in the world can compete against a much larger one halfway across the country because we live in a globalized world. So the need is there. The second is essentially, what is the solution? So I'm not telling you that everyone has to compete. How do you essentially compete on the world stage? And that is a destination organization. No other entity, no other responsibility can a destination organization, destination marketer is the only entity in the world that can essentially connect between private and public relations. In the same day, you can have conversations with hoteliers and attractions and restaurateurs, with also forms of government, economic development, local officials, civic leaders. Destination organizations are the only fundamental solution for that. And to really drive that home, it's you all, destination professionals, are the singular solution who can drive that. You all are essentially community shared assets, just like a sports team that gets, a performing coach, an academic that gets in tenured teachers. You all are the solution. You're the only individuals, who can synergize those type of topics of conversations for the betterment of your community. And really finally, the fourth question, and where we're going to start to sort of pivot into tactics, is who are you fundamentally helping? If I would ask you that question and you would tell me, well, I'm helping the hoteliers, I'm helping the restaurateurs, I'm helping the attractions, I'm going to tell you you're wrong. Those aren't your number one customer. In reality, those are your supplier. You take the suppliers to your customers. Your customer is your community. It's your residents. It's your citizen. That is number one. A lot of destination in the world, we are recipients of public money. And being a recipient of public money means that your stakeholder not shareholder, is the citizen, is the resident. So if I'm now telling you that your number one customer is the resident, that sort of changes how you talk and emote yourself to that audience. Much different than when you talk about restaurants and hotels and attractions. And that's really what the core of the lexicon is that I want to talk to you today about is then how do you essentially connect and talk to your residents and to the greater community at large. Okay, so let's start this off. So the beginning point for this is really the story of Destination National and how we sort of realized into the need for us to pivot and change how we talk to our community. So in early 2017, we started looking into a tool to track political chatter, more or less. We use a tool called Quorum. A lot of other agencies use this to do bill tracking, how are laws passing, who are speaking as such. We knew we wanted to enter into that type of stakeholder engagement, but we didn't quite know what to do with it at the time. I'll be fully honest and fully transparent there. We knew we wanted to get into it. We just didn't quite know what to do. And then Visit Florida happened. Now, for those who aren't aware, Visit Florida in the United States is a state that is, has probably one of the largest tourism economies in the United States. You have Disney, you have Epcot, you have all the, beaches and sun. It is a state driven by tourism. And we started seeing in 2017, this word being thrown around as it related to the funding of Visit Florida. The term corporate welfare, picking winners and losers. And we started to notice on the political lens, in terms of social media and whatnot, these politicians were using this term over and over and over and over again. And that's kind of gave us our first aha moment. Let's actually look and see, when did politicians start to actually use this word? When did they articulate it? And even though in 2017, we sort of started at apex, this was happening for years and years and years before. And that was the aha moment. We realized that politicians, before they go out and speak in the public sphere, their focus testing those words long before they hit out the public. They're measuring which one has a sort of more emotional resonance and connectivity with their audiences long before they even publish out, tweet it, post it to Facebook or Instagram. So that was sort of our aha moment with that. Well, maybe we could start tracking what are the literal words that are being used. And that's kind of the first aha moment. The second is, we always wanted to sort of identify at the earliest, at least in the United States, the beginning, who were allies of states who talked about tourism positively, who talked about destination promotion. This slide is outdated, but it serves a very key purpose. And that is when you go down the list, in the United States, you look at the party lines, you see DR, so Democrat or Republican. If you looked at this, there was no matching set. It wasn't entirely Democrats. It wasn't entirely Republican. You can see it's actually almost split. Both Democrats and Republicans are talking about tourism and destination promotion in a positive light. And that was one of the second big aha moments for us, was that tourism and destination promotion doesn't have to be partisan. It doesn't have to be one side or the other, one side against the other. It's that you can be on radically different ends of this political spectrum, but you can still come together as it relates to how you articulate and value destination promotion. In particular, this is Andrew Cuomo from New York and Scott Walker from Wisconsin, I always like to point out. These are, again, social media mentions. So these are them on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, putting out information that relates to destination promotion for the state. And I always like to point out here that, actions matter. Actions matter louder than words, but words still matter. I like to point out Mr. Walker from Wisconsin particularly. When he was in office, when I would look through social media, I would repeatedly see him driving Harley Davidson. I would see him wearing Badger, their local mascot gear. I would see him using Milwaukee tools and sort of stuff. In the public space, he got it. He understood what tourism meant for the state of Wisconsin. But when he left, the new governor who came in, I seldom, if at all, see them speak in the social media space regarding tourism. But one of the first things they did was they actually increased the budget for the state for tourism. So that's why I say I like to point out, actions can be louder than words, but words still matter. So continue with that along the party lines, we wanted to actually start matching out the little words that the politicians were using as they're describing tourism. So a word cloud, essentially. What are the little and figurative words they're using to describe it? And we started to see a couple words starting to appear over and over and over again. And so if I go back to my initial cornerstone, right, that I said that I believe destination promotion is a common good, a public good for the greater good, you know, in comparison to things like clean water, infrastructure, education, safety, and security. Well, how are politicians using those words? And let's compare them to how we use our words, right? So we actually started tracking how do people, when they use the word tourism, what words they use? When they talk about economic development, what are the words they use? Education and teachers, you know, a sort of fundamental backbone for society. Safety, hospitals and firefighters, medical staff, personnel. What are the words they use? And after all those word search and that kind of stuff, we came up with essentially, I'm sorry, one last one, neighborhoods and downtowns and community. When we sort of culminated all those words together, we came up with what we call our tourism lexicon. Words that basically are spoken about as it relates to common goods, greater goods, the public goods. And so the couple things I need to point out on here and a quick kind of demonstration of how this works. So the first is that you see the date on there, the 2019 New Tourism Lexicon. That is because every year we will update it. We actually started this in 2018 with only 10 words. And we very quickly realized that 10 words was not enough. So in 2019, we came back and upped it to basically double it. And we're continuing to do the work for the 2020, which we'll be releasing hopefully shortly. So I'll give a quick example of how this works. So we have a tool called the Event Impact Calculator. I know some of you are familiar with it, some of them don't, but it's basically a measurement for an event that comes to your destination and the type of money that is generated towards it. It spits out a report that talks about, you know, jobs and direct spending and very much statistical figures. And so when you would run a report, it might give you a report that says, you know, this meeting created 10,000 jobs for my community. I would rework that and say, this opportunity provided 10,000 people to work in my neighborhoods, my downtown, and my community because of this investment. It's a subtle shift. It's an emotional shift. What I'm essentially gravitating towards is starting to rely much more on the emotional webbing of how we speak over simply statistics and essentially logic. Now, I'm not saying to go away from logic, that type of stuff, but you know, we live in illogical times, and no longer are we able to rely solely on statistics and data and stuff to lead us the way. Now, I'm not saying you have to go away from that. I'm not saying that you need to, you know, completely turn your back on it. What I'm saying is that we, as a sector in an industry, have to subtly shift to start to lead with the story and the emotion of what we do and back it up with ROI and stat. That is your air cover, you know. So when you can come out there and say everything you do, you have the air cover to protect you for it. So when we released the previous iteration, the 2018, we had a couple members reach out to us and use it in two different ways that I always like to showcase as examples. So the first is our own. We wanted to utilize it and, you know, change what we thought our definition of a destination region should be. So one of the most reliable places on the web, Wikipedia, this was the former definition of Wikipedia for a DMO or a CVB. And we changed it. Surprisingly, that's actually pretty easy to do. And of course, I have to always check it. It's still there. And the important thing for us was that we wanted to change and showcase the destination as it relates to what they apply to the community, the people they serve. And as I mentioned earlier, we had a couple of destination organizations, DMOs and CVBs, who reached out to us and says, I think I have a way to utilize this. So the first was, this is from Visit Phoenix, Arizona. What they were fundamentally trying to do was, I need to build support with my staff. I want the staff of my organization to feel pride in what we do. And so they thought a starting point is, let's change our about us. We have no mission. We have no vision statement. We have this multi-paragraph about us that no one relates to. No one feels anything towards. I want to change that. So I said, have at it. Here's our about us. We want you all, staff at Destination International, to rewrite it on what you think it is and send it back to us, and we'll kind of go from there. So we did. We, from DI, Destination International, wrote an iteration of what we thought a modern day mission, vision, or about us would look like for a modern day destination through the lexicon. And we gave it back to them. Essentially, we articulated what we want to be, what we do, and how we do it. And they took it and they said, okay, let's meld our personality, our emotion of what it means to be a resident of Phoenix into this. And this is what they came up with. I don't need you all to read the entirety of it, but my favorite is actually the very last sentence in the vision statement. With Visit Phoenix's efforts, Greater Phoenix will achieve a healthy and sustainable visitor industry for the enjoyment of the visitor and the benefit of the local community. They understood that what they do, even as staff of Visit Phoenix, wasn't just that they benefited, their fundamental community, but also themselves as staff, because they are also residents of the community. And I thought that was an interesting example of how they took the lexicon and applied it within. But it can go both ways. So I always have to check. This is on their website too, just to make sure that their work still stands. And this is an example of actually done outward. So this is a very small destination organization located in Illinois, Visit Champaign County. And this is the president and CEO, Jane DeLuce. Jane does a weekly newsletter out to her stakeholders, mostly board members, civic leaders. And she said, okay, I need them to speak like I do. Her staff is small and they onboard and get it immediately. But how do I get my board members, my politicals, how do I get them to speak like I do? And so she started changing her actual public newsletter. And so this little bit at the end, I always like to point out, was she started putting these little snippets in here that her civic leaders were then copying and repeating. And she put them through the lexicon. And you can see, I'll read it through you. We promote this community as a great travel destination and enhance our public image to want to live and work here. These efforts fuel economic growth and provide opportunity for people in this community. Jane understood that it wasn't just enough for her staff to speak through this. It had to be reverberated, it had to be echoed through our political stakeholders that we need as part of it, that are also residents of the community. And then for fun, I like to rewrite my own. So you heard in my background, I used to work for the Baltimore CVB, the Baltimore Destination Organization. I did it for over a decade. So I had to write a ton of annual reports and annual research findings and that kind of stuff. And so I like to point out my old work that I redid through the lexicon. So I'll put out both simultaneously, and I don't have to worry about reading everyone through these, but you can see my initial writings in black were very much stat, right? They were these statistics that, I hate to say it, a lot of times just fly over people's faces. Everyone has a positive ROI. Everyone has these, excellent tourism stats and responsibilities they talk about the community, but it really was a responsibility through the lexicon to actually start to showcase those with a little bit more of an emotional tweak, a subtle one, that people understood the story long before they understood the stat behind it. My favorite really is the last one I rewrote. In Visit, and I wrote basically, you can see there, tourism means big business, economic prosperity, and most importantly, jobs. And I rewrote it actually as, experiencing our community is paramount. Tourism provides opportunity, investment, and work to our local family, friends, and neighbors. And you can see there, I'm not trying to shy entirely away from statistic and data. I'm instead just trying to lead with emotion in the story in front of it. Now, I think one of the biggest mistakes myself and Jack Johnson made with this, and I think humility is a trait that we should all have, is that we rolled this out to the entirety of the world, and we didn't do that to staff. And that was a huge mistake on our part, because if it's just myself and other members of the advocacy team who are going on and speaking this, it does me no good if my accountant, my membership, my marketing, my communications team aren't speaking on the same platform. And so we decided to take a day and do this, to actually run through what does it actually mean to be community shared value and what does it mean through the lexicon. So this is a staff image from early 2020. For those who came to annual convention last year, you saw Jack Johnson, our Chief Advocacy Officer, do this presentation for one of the keynotes. But before that, we actually went through an all-day experience with staff on what does it actually mean to be community shared value and through the lexicon. These are some of the little slides we went through. And again, what I'm describing to you today is very much what we described to our staff during that time. We articulated, what does it mean to be a common good, a public good? You know, we started to articulate why our audience has shifted, that there's been this fundamental paradigm shift in not just our sector and our industry, but the world at large. And that we need to rethink who our fundamental audience is. And again, started to talk more about why has it shifted, articulating the problem. We even showed our staff basically an early iteration of the 2019 lexicon. And then we actually went through all day exercises of the staff to actually run through case studies of how to use it. And this really was to get like I said, all the way from my accountant to my membership to speak the same platform that we speak. And so we actually ran through a couple case examples. You know, what does this look like through a large convention and visitors bureau? What does it look like through a small, a rural, or an international one? And the team actually broke up into different teams and actually ran through what does a modern day mission statement and about us look like through the lexicon and through the understanding of being a community shared value. And you can see there some of the questions we asked staff to answer. And so the real sort of beauty of it came after it, right? So, you know, after we felt the entire team sort of understand the breadth of what we were trying to articulate, that's when you started to see the subtle changes of it influencing everything and how we articulate. So this is a good example. This is our Destination Nation Foundation website from early 2018. You can see here, it's very much in the vein of this statistic over story aspect. You know, you see words like dollars and jobs and ROI and things like that. But let me show you what it looks like after the lexicon. So this is it today. Again, once you do the lexicon once, you start seeing the words pop up over the place. But I actually missed one. There's actually another community at the bottom here I missed. But you see the words there: community, resident, provide, help, opportunity. These are starting to radiate through every aspect of our communications we as a trade association are doing. And I think it's important to articulate because this is not a single person's effort. It is dependent upon the entirety of an organization to really adopt this, to really help it permeate through everything we do. So that brings us to today. So I mentioned, you know, we're working on our own updating tourism lexicon, but a pandemic happened and it's still happening, right? This is probably the single greatest in terms of social media mentions. This is probably the largest, single most greatest apex event to ever happen. Almost every politician, citizen around the world is talking the pandemic. And we wanted to sort of look at, well, how are politicians talking about the pandemic? And so using the same methodology we did with the tourism lexicon, what does it look like when politicians are describing the pandemic, COVID-19, the coronavirus? So I'm going to put just a refresh again. This was our tourism lexicon. And the first thing we did was we wanted to pull apart two countries at the time, was just the United States and Canada. At the time, we only had the resources to look at these two countries. Since then, we can now go forward and be a little more international and look at Australia, Colombia, Mexico, the UK, Germany, South Africa, and other countries that we want to look into. But we want to use this as a starting point. And I think the nuances are what's more interesting here. This is basically told in order of importance. So the word health is the number one used word politicians in Canada were using in the same sentence they're describing coronavirus, COVID-19, or the pandemic. What's interesting is that health is at the top for Canada. You can see though it's the very bottom for the United States. You know, the word government, you know, Canada, like a lot of other countries around the world, which are a little more socialized, you know, have a little more sort of belief fundamentally in the government than, you know, citizens of the United States. Also interesting to see business very top for United States, business at the bottom for Canada. And so when we compared them against the tourism lexicon, you can see there was quite a bit of overlap: health, need, people, you know, and some understandings of that. what we really wanted to get towards, though, what was the fundamental message across all of them? You know, where was it that regardless of country, what is the single greatest message that someone could do? And this is my final slide and my sort of final parting advice for this group, is that right now, everyone across the world is articulating the same thing. And that's people need help. People need support. You know, as destination organizations and destination professionals, you know, regardless if countries are trying to reopen or not, we have to understand that right now, the biggest fundamental message you can do and everything you articulate and market and message and promote has to be through this lens, that people need help and people need support, you know, and you can take that larger, right? It's communities need help and communities need support. That is our action, our call to action at the end of this, right? That everything that we do going forward as we still are in this pandemic is through that lens of help and support. So with that, I am actually finished. I want to thank everyone for this. Looks like at the clock, I see a couple still minutes to spare. I'm going to stop sharing, but I'm happy to try to take questions, answer the best I can, that sort of stuff. But just wanted to thank everyone for the time. And again, thank you for the group for allowing me the opportunity to present today. So thank you.
Thank you, Andreas, Don, and Melissa. A continuación le vamos a pedir a nuestros facilitadores, a Eduardo, Ana María Vizcasillas y a Graciela Padoín que den inicio a este conversatorio. Gracias.
Silvana, is it okay to add a few more comments?
Yes,
Great,
Don.
thank you.
Por
Great, thank you.
Todo lo que quieras, Don.
Well, first of all, every time I think Melissa and I listen to Andreas, we find another piece of information that's worthwhile. So Andreas, thank you for another great presentation. You know, I think one of the things that we may be all seeing around the world right now is that, and I think Andreas alluded to it, I believe that up until the pandemic, we've been a very humble industry. We've been humble around the world. That's the one consistency. And I think until the pandemic has now happened in every city, every country around the world, it's been a flattening. It's been clearly something that is now let mayors and governors and presidents understand that this is an industry that does not happen by itself. It takes bright, strategic men and women around the world leading the effort. It takes resources. It takes effort to continually be successful. And this is one of the things that Roger Dow and I talk a lot about, and that is that in the United States, and I hate to keep referring to the United States, but a lot of our members are here. We have 459 members in the U.S. alone. And one of the things that we're discovering now is that you would think in a country where tourism and meetings represent 10% almost of the total GDP in this country, that clearly in this time of need for funding, that our industry would be at the head of the line in terms of funding. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case now. Here we are, the US passed over a $3 trillion act, basically 30 days once this pandemic started. And here we are sitting on July 6th, and we are not eligible for these funds. Now, if you look at the differentiation, right now, 97% of our US members fall within a nonprofit category. They're not eligible. So one of the things we strongly recommend picking up on what Andreas was talking about, we've learned a lesson here. You don't advocate, you don't talk about the importance of what your industry means for your community, your country. When times are bad, you talk about it when times are good. And we've done a lot on that. And I've had a takeaway that I keep adding to it. And excuse this simple piece of paper here. I think we as an industry have always been pretty good about talking to ourselves about how great work we do. And maybe on occasion, depending upon where we work and who our mayor is or who our governor is, we talk with our elected leaders, but maybe not as deep as we should. But the group that we're sort of finding over here, they're the influencers within your city, country, wherever you may be, are the people that fall within the civic community, the people that Andreas talked about. These are bankers, these are lawyers, these are doctors, that people don't realize day to day what a healthy tourism community means. but you know what it means for your community. So I would say when you look at Andreas's work and the community shared value, you know, there's a lot of work to do on it, but I would really recommend you go back to it, look at the way your mission statement talks about how does it relate to your community. Melissa and I worked for a very forward-thinking mayor in Chicago before coming here 4+ years ago. His name was Mayor Rahm Emanuel. And he was very quick to say, you know what, when people come to Chicago, and we were fortunate, we took it to over 50+ million visitors in 5 years. But really when we began being successful was when we started going into the neighborhoods, when we started going into the local citizens. And I know many of you do that. And I'm not preaching to you, but I think right now we have a chance for a restart. I think we have a true opportunity to have a whole new strategic mission around the world on the vital importance of what tourism means, not just economically, but socially, morally, whatever it may be. Because we're finding out what this world would be if we didn't have a healthy tourism and meetings economy. And I just wanted to piggyback on what the great work Andreas is doing, and I wish you all well. But we're certainly open to questions, comments, if time allows, Silvana.
Yes, there is a good time for questions. Pero vamos a poner aquí un poquito de sabor
No se
en
escucha, Ana
Spanglish.
María.
Don't worry. ¿Cómo que no se escucha?
Ana María, ¿podrías
Se
repetir
escucha.
porque no se te escuchó?
Ok, no hay problema. Buenas tardes a todos y aquí vamos a mezclar un poquito Spanglish, aunque tenemos muy buena traducción. Muchas gracias a Melissa, a Don y a Andreas por sus buenos comentarios. Y queremos hacer la primera pregunta a Don. Don, we have a question for you. As a former CEO of 3 magnificent destinations and now working with wonderful professionals around the world, we know you care a lot about the pillars. Just like in the bureaus, we have pillars for our organizations. You care a lot with your team about the pillars at Destinations International. Could you share what those 4 pillars are? And in your opinion, for the wonderful professionals who are joining us today, if you were in our shoes, what is that pillar that could be most effective for us? Sure.
And I'm sure that clearly Andreas and Melissa, you know, Melissa came in and not only helped in the many things she does, but she also rebranded the organization. And we went out to our members and we went out and it took us a good 6 months, but we said, what do you want? What do you need? What will you support? In that order to our members. And they came back and we said, we want you to be focused in the area of advocacy, research, and education. And it was repetitive: advocacy, research, and education. One of the first things we did was we went and hired Jack Johnson, who we believe, Jack and I worked together with Melissa in Chicago, and he was part of our core team. And then when it came to research, we went and hired Andreas, who is clearly one of the brightest minds in our industry. And we Baltimore was kind enough to allow him to come to work for us. And then we went and found the best person in the area of education. And then when we all got into it, and Andreas and Melissa jump in anytime, the whole thing that we deal with, whether we're sitting in Latin America or whether we're sitting in Canada, is community. And we represent communities. So to simplify for people like me, it's care, community, advocacy, research, and education. And I would encourage all of you to look and see in your community whether you're advocating to that. But I would tell you right now that I think, Andreas, you may want to add to this, the advocacy piece cannot be more emphasized with all that's going on. Because clearly in the recovery, there will be limited dollars that your elected leaders will be forced to make decisions with. And I would say we've got to really make a compelling message as to why we're deserving of funds when others may be at the table as well. So, I don't know what you want to add.
Small ad is just that I think there are other countries around the world that get this better than sometimes the Americans do, but it doesn't mean that there's not still struggles and tribulations. You know, and there really is never any not keeping the pedal on, and per se. You know, even in the best times and also in the worst times, the need to articulate destination promotion and marketing, you know, it's greater than ever. All of our fundamental economies have stalled and slowed. You know, it's an engine, right? And sometimes engines need help to get started again. And that's really what we do. Destination promotion, destination marketing is a form of economic development that crosses currencies, that crosses languages, that crosses budgets. And it's really our job to constantly articulate that. I would never try to start a car without a battery in it. And I would never try to not restart a society and a government or an economy without destination promotion and marketing.
And just to add one final comment to this, based on the data that we see with all of our partners, some of which are on the phone now, you know, as much as I'd like to believe this is going to be a quick recovery, I don't believe it will be. I believe this is going to be a slow, rigorous process. And what we're seeing around the world right now will be these concentric circles that I alluded to earlier. First will come back will probably be that local business, that person coming back into their downtown community and maybe trying to experience a restaurant or theater or whatever it may be. And then hopefully that concentric circle geographically, if it's allowed, will get a little bit bigger. But I do think the time of people getting on airplanes and traveling across their country nationally and across the world is going to take a period of time. So I think we've got to be very focused, very diligent, and very inclusive on how we rebuild. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I would just like to add to that, excuse me, Don. I think one of the biggest, you know, our purpose as an association is that we want destinations to be successful. So especially at this critical moment in time, we know that destinations aren't open. We know that marketing is stalled. We know that there's not a crystal ball to predict necessarily what's been happening. So what's been really important for Destinations International right now is to keep a pulse of what's been happening, really checking in with our members via surveys, anecdotally other questions to really understand what their needs are, because they change in real time, especially right now. And also to provide really just kind of the educational development. A lot of that is free that we provide to our membership. You know, every week we've had a webinar or an update as it relates to recovery planning. And in addition to that, other professional development, educational skills, because we realize that in this time, as people are waiting to see what happens, it's a time for people to kind of build their skills, look at new directions, and kind of understand where the future of the industry needs to go. And so a lot of the conversations we're happening with Jack and Andreas and the team and Don is really, really focused on kind of what is the future from a destination organization perspective. What does a destination organization need to look like? What does a funding model need to look like that's not reliant upon what we currently are traditionally used to structures, either government or other private entities through particular, you know, taxation, whatever else. So, you know, we're really trying to focus on, as Jack Johnson likes to say, there's not going to be a new normal. That just is not going to exist. It's going to kind of move to the next place, and trying to be predictive and allowing us to get tools and resources. And mind you, this is all new for everyone. No one's ever, that I know, lived through a pandemic. So we're using this time to really hone in on what we can, you know, create. And as we learn more in terms of what our members need, that's kind of how we are essentially responsive.
Sylvan, if I could add just one more thing, and it's prompted by seeing some of the faces and some friends on the call that really are focused in the MICE market and meetings development. And I did want to let you know, we spent a lot of time with the key industry associations, whether it's PCNA, NPI, ASAE, IAE, you name the acronym, we work with them right now. I think if you talk with them and you see the research that we hear also from our meeting planner advisory board, meetings will come back, and they are beginning to come back. It's critical that somehow the destination speaks with one voice. So when a planner is looking for information about bringing a meeting, whether it's to a hotel, to multiple hotels, or a citywide, they really want one organization now that can speak with authority and having conclusive information about the safety and security protocols in your building. So that would be the one thing I would say that's important. And we're hearing from a lot of planners right now telling us that the advanced organizations and destinations are also one now that are looking at the physical space in their buildings and determining, wow, what can I turn now into maybe a not high utilized meeting room and turn that into a place where I can have a studio, because virtual meetings we're hearing are not going to go away. What we're doing here to some extent, the hybrid meeting of face-to-face and virtual is probably going to be a reality. And I think that attests to probably our meeting next week in Chicago. So just a couple words, because I did see some of my friends who were probably saying, okay, tell me about meetings and conventions right now. But thank you.
Gracias, Don, Melissa y Andreas. Graciela, yo creo que tienes una pregunta, ¿verdad?
Sí, cómo no. Well, thank you, Don and Andreas and Melissa, for the great inputs. We definitely see the urge for better advocacy, and you showed us how we can better communicate to our government officials and also maybe strategic partners to support our organizations. And also you showed us about this strategic shift in terms of who's the client, what's the target, right? Well, in Latin America, there are several types, all types of destination organizations in terms of size, governance, maturity level. And every time that I am facilitating a Destination Next workshop together with Ana or Eduardo or other global partner, and sometimes we mention about our community playing a critical role in what we do, we see many faces looking like, what, really? Right now, I can say that many destinations in Latin America, they have not prioritized, or they have prioritized other markets than the local, regional, surrounding communities. And maybe what they're doing right now is supporting their members and not paying much attention to residents and meeting planners. So these should be the first guests right now when we are ready to reopen. And we should rely on them to bring this clear message that we can offer a safe and responsible environment. So what are the tips that you could give us to stimulate the demand? And what is this new business model to be a more effective bureau from now on?
Andreas, you want to take this first stab at it, or Melissa?
To try to be as hopefully quick and brief as I can, you pointed a lot of illustrations that a lot of countries and communities around the world are facing. My own self included, where I used to work in Baltimore, we never promoted or marketed to anyone in Baltimore. None of the ads, and suffice to say, no one knew what we do. And I think in this next normal that we're phasing into, we have to articulate what we represent as a value, and the point of the matter is that when we are valued, we are cherished and we are essentially funded, and the only way to be valued is to have people know what we do. And that is have the residents understand that aspect of what we do. This is why societies across the world, understand when it comes to budget meetings and budget proposals and who gets currencies around the world. The first thing they say is, okay, we need to educate our society. We need to fund teachers. We need clean water. So let's help our public works. The next normal is essentially actually starting back to the basics. A lot of people forget the origins of a destination organization. One of the first, at least in the United States, was in the city of Detroit. And its fundamental mission was simply the advancement for the people of Detroit. We have to get back to that. We have to get back to the single advancement of this community. The lexicon is one tactic of that, but there are other tactics of it. Another one, I think an easy one, is to just simply take the temperature of your residents, survey them. We do a lot of work where we survey and look at the analysis of visitors, but we don't do the same thing for our residents. Not only are the residents aware of what we represent as tourism assets, but do they have pride in it? Do they value it? Do they connect the dots between the things they enjoy as a resident and the things you do as a destination promoter and marketer? I think those are all subtle things that the destination organization has to pivot towards to align with. And in a lot of ways, it's stripping back to the very basics. Like I said, it's for the advancement of our communities, more or less.
Great. Don, would you like to add to that, or Melissa?
You know, I think Andreas was leading to that, and I actually wrote verbatim what he had said, and that is, just don't assume that people know what you do for a living and what your organization does. I always get a kick out when I try to tell people what I do now. It was different when if I worked in Chicago or Seattle or wherever, people would sort of understand, oh, tourism and what you do. But I think right now there's a bit of a mystery in terms of what we do. And I think the more we can uncomplicate it and make our messaging the same way the same way others are valued, the better will it be. But we got to bring it down to our local citizens understand. I know some of you represent destinations that up until March 15th, March 19th, you had many citizens in your community and businesses saying, enough, we don't want any more. And clearly that's not the case today. So I think we have a chance where there's real high tourism demand or a lot of meetings. We just got to engage the local community greater. And I think in doing that, you're going to see both during the good times and bad times, greater communication and appreciation and respect for what you all do.
Yeah, that's good. Melissa, would you like to add something in terms of the new funding model? How can we diversify our funding sources?
Well, I can't speak specifically yet to that, only because that is actually a new, really thought leadership that Jack Johnson is going to present next week at our annual convention. And so he's been doing the work on that. I don't know if Andreas wants to speak to it briefly, but we've just seen with specifically members in the US with the hotel transit occupancy tax that is not being collected due to the closure of hotels. We're seeing our members just have their budget slashed, I think as high as, I've heard 90%
Yes.
to 5%. So it's been pretty traumatic, and having a model that depends on that kind of structure doesn't create sustainability for organizations. And so, Andreas, I don't mean to throw you here to answer this question.
No, I'm happy. I don't have an answer for you that's going to say, 10% needs to come out of here or that not. What I am going to tell you is to understand this. As Melissa said, a lot of our respective responsibilities have been solely dependent upon visitor dollars. So that could be occupancy, that could be restaurateur, that kind of stuff. But the thing is that, and for every little county and country of the world, the nuances will be there, but if you're valued, you're funded. But you have to look at it this way. How many people benefit from what you do? All of them need to be essentially part of the table and relates to funding. So I'll give a small, quick example. All these countries around the world have just proven that the work from home reality is beyond truth. Essentially, I can tell you work from home is dead. Work from anywhere is really the new mantra. So all these societies have built up of these really dense urban cores where people have had to work right by where they live. Traditional cities have been built upon this way. And so there's a whole sector of commercial real estate that is going to change. It's no longer going to be about attracting people to live in these buildings, that work in these buildings and whatnot, because they know they can do the job from home. So I think an entity like a commercial real estate agent or real estate agents in general should help fund destination promotion because they benefit from that. Any aspect of quality of place, right? The attraction of talent. I didn't talk about this, but the greatest currency right now in the world is talent acquisition. In America in this past 2 years, you saw all this stuff happening with Amazon and the headquarter too. And it wasn't because people wanted 50,000 jobs in their community. It was that they wanted 50,000 potential bright new minds to live in their city. Talent acquisition, anyone who benefits from that to get those type of individuals in your destination should be at the table to help fund that because they're the ones who benefit the most from it. And there's a myriad of examples we're going to kind of go into next week for that. But I think that's sort of the examples you need to start looking towards, is more who benefits from what we do. And that's who we got to bring to the table to help fund this. That crosses the Rubicon of both public and private relations.
Excellent. You three nailed it. We should never take anything for granted, right? Eduardo, your turn.
Thank you, Grazie. Well, thank you very much, Don, Melissa, Andreas. That has been great. And I really thank you for being and spending some time with Latin America. And I want to talk specifically about Latin America. Here in this group, we have a lot of destinations from different countries, different size of organizations. And I want to ask you for your recommendations to the region in terms of two things. One is positioning, because of course, everybody knows Rio and maybe Cancun, Buenos Aires, but we still need to position these small, beautiful destinations. And I really think that those are ideal for the new reality in terms of the space, the land, and the protocols and everything that now we'll be looking for the new traveler. So one is the positioning, and the other one is the business. So how can I always, when I worked for a destination, I used the organizations like yours, like Destinations International, as a vehicle to get to the meeting planners or to get to the public through positioning, advertising, voice, amplifying my message, etc. So what do you recommend, and how can you help the Latin American DMOs?
It's funny, I'll use Canada of all things as a reference point. I think many of you know this organization for many, many years was very, very US centric. It had tried to play, quote, in the international space for a long time. And then I think probably a decade or so ago, it became very focused on being US. And I applaud Ana Maria for being one of the people in the marketplace that almost pushed the organization. Well, you know, our team came in and we made a really conscious decision that we were going to be called Destinations International. And, you know, that map behind me far goes beyond the United States where we happen to be based. So our thought process, the way we think, the way we look is always trying to figure out, you know, the value proposition. I think based on what we've been able to do in Canada, where we had limited representation 4 years ago, we have 25 destinations in Canada. They have embraced all the learning. They actually host once a year our CDME program from education. I know they came up. So they've taken literally every product now, including the EIC, which is our calculator. And other than when we did a partnership within Europe with ECM, the country that has probably embraced EIC to the greatest has been Canada. So, you know, we modified things to accommodate the Canadian market because they are different in the United States, they're different in Europe. So, Eduardo, I think it's a great question. I think a lot of the tools and resources that have been built over the last probably decade, but more importantly, the last 4 or 5 years, are scalable for Latin America. And you've seen the success, again, with Ana Maria and you helping us within Mexico. We're seeing that. You know, we have an exciting partnership coming up in another part of Latin America that would be huge. We had a chance to get down to Colombia, and we saw the work that Pro Colombia does. And you talked about, you know, the eye opener for me was going to Medellin. I love all the destinations, but to see Ana Maria was with us on that trip, you're talking about an eye opener that really makes you appreciate the uniqueness that you all represent and opportunities for people. And people will begin to continue to explore. So I don't know whether that answers the question, but I think the tools and resources there, we will work with you to modify and adapt those tools. And if there's something that you need that doesn't exist, we'd certainly have the partners that could really tap into it. We've seen hotel data is very important. Yeah. That is vital to tell the story on the recovery. And if you don't have data to say where you are versus where you're heading, it's going to be tough to do it. So data is going to be critical for all of you to tell your story for sustained funding and more funding.
And I would like to add to that a little bit. I think what's really important specifically right now, I know that the the recovery is going to be anywhere from an 18 to 24 month, I've heard even longer, process for destinations globally. But what is really critically important right now that we're seeing from a lot of research is, what the sentiment that, visitors have in terms of, looking to travel and where they're going. We're specifically seeing a lot of data in the US in terms of people traveling closer to home, doing those over the weekend type trips. We're seeing countries internationally that are doing kind of travel bubbles. So those countries that have agreements where they know from a quarantine safety perspective that they have the comfortability in terms of opening up those borders, for example. Those kinds of things are going to be really important right now, because what the data is telling us is people are extremely concerned about their self and well-being and their health. And so you may not be open, but I think, there's a lot of media that talks about the bad things that's going on with this virus. But I've seen destinations, for example, they've tried to change the narrative, and that narrative being about what they're doing as a destination organization or a CVB or a DMO in terms of creating a pledge in which, their local residents are there to welcome. They want to make sure that you understand as a visitor that it's safe to come to their community, and that they've prepared and they've done things, in addition to normal that we're used to in terms of welcoming visitors back. And that's been part of their consistent messaging, even though, we've seen the closing of destinations, the sort of reopening, and now, I don't know, kind of as this curve bends around the world, what's going to happen next. But I think it's really important to make sure that your story and your narrative is out there in terms of what's going on in the destinations, even if you're just speaking to your local community, because those are also your brand ambassadors. So it's not a moment to stop. I know that marketing and advertising typically gets turned off in moments like this. It's completely understandable from a budgetary perspective, but you can still do things that are through earned media like PR and communications and pitching stories to organic via social, or figuring out a way from a local perspective to have that story being told, at least from your local community, as there'll be folks from that surrounding drive market that can continue to travel as they see things becoming a little more welcoming from a health perspective.
In just one final comment, Silvana, just to piggyback on Melissa's comment, and that is that word community that we were very strategic in adding to advocacy, research, and education. I think that's being tested to the nth degree right now, where the message we've had to our members is you don't need to go alone. You don't need this to make your battle. There's a collective community where there is knowledge. There's, when Puerto Rico went through some of the challenges with natural disasters, rather than every destination who had a natural disaster, we just basically put it in a database and said, here's what happens, how you recover, when it's happening, and post-recovery. How do you get out of it? So the information sharing is there. And that's what I think has been most exciting to see in the toughest of times, that will be slow in the recovery, but you just don't need to go it alone. It can be a great effort. And I applaud the work that Silvana does with the team. But we're here to help as well.
Very good.
Silvana, adelante, que tenías una pregunta.
Yo tenía una pregunta para Don.
Sí.
Sin lugar a dudas que tenemos que pensar en el futuro de nuestros destinos, y creo que una herramienta que nos brinda Destinations International es la calculadora. Respecto de la medición del impacto del legado de la calculadora, entendemos que podemos medir trabajo, entendemos que podemos medir impacto económico, entendemos que podemos medir el ROI de los eventos. Mi pregunta es, con relación al impacto del legado, ¿también podemos medirlo con la calculadora? Ya que me parece un elemento esencial para poder involucrar a la comunidad, y no solo a la comunidad, sino a todos los gobiernos que realmente desean que sus electores tomen estas herramientas para poder apostarle al turismo, porque nosotros sabemos que nuestros gobiernos y a veces nuestros dirigentes políticos consideran al turismo que el turista no vota, y al no votar, sobre todo en países donde el voto es obligatorio, las herramientas económicas o el acompañamiento al sector de la industria del turismo y más a la industria de reuniones es un poco menos importante. Entonces, desde ese lugar, esa herramienta, la calculadora, nos permite medir legado, y cuáles son los parámetros para medir ese legado.
Was it translated to you folks?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful.
Oh, I got it in English.
Yes,
okay.
Answer that question, actually.
I didn't get it in English.
I didn't get it either. So go ahead, Melissa. You got it.
No, I mean, Andreas is the expert on the EIC. He really needs to answer that particular question. If you could just repeat it in short form.
Eduardo, ¿se la quieres repetir en inglés de una vez?
Repito,
Sí.
si quieren. O Eduardo, si querés vos traducirla.
Silvana was asking about the importance to measure not only the economic impact of the meetings or the visitors, but also the legacy beyond economy. And also because it's so important to convince the politicians that don't really understand tourism only because tourists do not vote. That's what she said. So I don't know if you have something to say.
Yeah, I can absolutely, I can to best that. So as relates to our tool, the Event Impact Calculator, what it essentially is doing beyond just showing new money, it's essentially showing new systems of investments into your community. So what do I mean by that? The legacy, that's actually a good word. I'm going to take that one. When we have events, you know, that book our convention centers and book our meeting spaces and that type of stuff, it is someone who's coming to experience your destination for the first time. They're spending money to house themselves. They're spending money to feed themselves. They're spending money to transport themselves around. All those funnels of monies and investments are coming to your community that wouldn't have come otherwise. What's important to understand is that money, that investment, is going into a lot of these cities and destinations and countries, funding that's applied for all, a general fund, a common fund. And what is that used for? So you want to talk about legacy, that's money used to build roads, infrastructure, bridges, airports, basic things, you know. It's used to fund teachers, you know, to educate children, to make better workers and that type of stuff. You know, the thing is that, you know, meetings and destinations that, you know, invite that business in and that kind of stuff, they're building legacies in other aspects. We don't do a good enough job always of showcasing or articulating that. And that's one thing that the lexicon can sort of help when you articulate an event impact calculation, is that you can say to someone saying, look, you know, it wasn't just that this meeting and event, you know, generated 10 million currency. You could say, no, this event actually provided, you know, 20 million to our city's general fund, which we will spend on roads, which we will spend on clean water or infrastructure, the things that do make a legacy. You know, we understand if we build a road today, it's not just helping the current generation get to work, but it's helping future generations as well. I hope that best sort of articulates that component.
Thank you, gracias.
Silvana, ¿quieres que vayamos cerrando? Había una preguntita.
Había una pregunta del público, sí.
Sí.
A ver, que todos tengan traducción, Don, Melissa y
la voy a hacer en español. Andreas and Donna and Melissa, I hope you get this in English. There's a very good question from the audience asking, could you please describe the difference between a CVB and a DMO, please?
Yeah, I
saw your smiles.
I answered that back in the group privately, so I apologize. I didn't say it to everyone, but essentially a Convention and Visitors Bureau, destination marketing organization, they are essentially the same thing. They are official tourism entity of a destination that is responsible for promotion, branding, and marketing to drive visitation to an organization. Our industry just has way too many acronyms. So we at Destinations International like to simplify it and refer to CVB'S and destination organizations as really the breadth and scope of what all of your destinations organizations are doing now is much broader than the original intention when I think a lot of those kind of acronyms and definitions were developed. So we're always trying to broaden that, just based on, again, going back to Don's original point, that people need to be aware of who you are and what you do. So I don't know, Don or Andreas, if you want to add anything to that question or answer.
I totally agree with you. We talk about this. The reason why I was smiling is because this is frequently discussed within our team. It seems like when we talk to the meeting planning organizations, they have a better understanding when you say you are a Convention and Visitors Bureau, or CVB seems to, I guess, relate better to them. But no, it's interchangeable, and we've not taken a vote one way or the other, but we're somewhat agnostic on this. But I think either works based on your situation.
I think also it's important, Don, to talk about the difference between destination marketing organizations and now the new concept of destination management also. That has been also important.
Which will add another period of complexity and understanding as to who the audience it's directed to. Yeah.
Okay. I would say, though, generally speaking, though, I mean, it's all inclusive. It's not one versus the. You are the brand manager. You are the marketing manager. You are the promotion manager. So in essence, it's really being about articulating your story and knowing that you own that brand as a destination. And from a management perspective, understanding how to manage your key stakeholders to ensure the delivery of the positioning of that brand. So, I think it's, I don't have an answer, Eduardo.
No, that's great. No, that was great. Thank you.
That's very good, because exactly what is happening is that, Melissa, from one side is marketing, on another side is management, but also the evolution of many organizations are such that when you share community values and when you express them and you win the support of not only the industry, you start talking outside your industry, your community starts to understand, value a positive sentiment towards the visitors economy, and then this organization, whether it's called CVB, Destination Marketing Organization, or Destination Management Organization, becomes the steward. So in Spanish, la evolución, lo que está ocurriendo es que puede ser un CVB o puede ser una organización de mercadeo, puede ser una organización de gerencia, pero la evolución es que el buró se convierte en el capitán y en el que mejor cuida las bondades de un destino. No solamente la marca, sino el gran custodio de las bondades del destino. Y eso solamente lo puede hacer una organización como la que ustedes representan. Así que, Silvana, te dejamos. Yes, Don.
No, I was going to say, Melissa says something I think it's really important. That is, you got to own the brand. And one of the things that is very important right now, there's some really frank conversations taking place in the United States right now, not just in the US, on race relations. And I'm really proud of the work we continue to do that will be part of every one of our members, and that is in the area of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And if that's not part of your plans right now, you need to go back, because that will be a global checklist right now as to how is your destination, how's your country competing in the global space, and that will be something that will be very critical as it is today, and it will be built upon.
Before giving the word to Silvana to close the session, I would love Melissa, Don, just to give the last word about inviting everybody to the convention next week and the special consideration you're having with Latin America.
I'm going to defer to my colleague, Ms. Cherry, since she's producing this meeting and lives her waking hours on it.
Waking hours. Yes, we are really excited and hope that you all can join us. This will probably be one of the easiest conventions everybody in the world can attend. So we hope that you can get online and spend time with us. We are really trying to push the content so that it's much more inclusive. I know that we've gotten feedback from the group in the past and having relevancy, especially to your destinations. And so that's where the inspiring greatness, theme actually comes into play, is taking ideas that you'll hear. And then, of course, we know that not every member of this group is a member of Destinations International, but we've created a special code so that you will also be able to receive that same US $199 member rate as our member. So, I will make sure that Eduardo or Savannah, I'll give you that code. So if you want to share with the group post based on your post-webinar communications, we'll have that. And if there's any questions, you can feel free to direct them to me on any additional access to Annual. And again, we are working on translation, working very hard. So we've been working with a company in Mexico City to make sure that we can have all of that set for you. Just fingers crossed, and we're going to get it all perfect in the next few days. So thank you.
Silvana.
Muchas gracias. Gracias, Dom. Gracias, Melissa. Muchas gracias, Andreas. Para nosotros ha sido un gusto enorme poder acompañar esta presentación y agradecerles las consideraciones que han tenido para los miembros de la Asociación de Conventions and Visitors Bureaus de Latinoamérica y el Caribe al considerarnos socios y poder brindarnos la oportunidad de inscribirnos en la próxima convención anual con valor tarifa socio Destinations International. Eso para nosotros es maravilloso, ya que tener acceso a las posibilidades que nos brinda su organización a nivel global es una oportunidad única. Quiero presentarles, antes de despedirnos, la campaña de destinos. Por favor, no se olviden, esta campaña muy breve, muy cortita. Por favor, chicos. Campaña, gracias, Maxi. Agradecerles entonces a Eduardo, Ana María, Graciela, Don, Andreas, Melissa, muchas gracias a todos los que nos acompañaron. Y finalmente decirles, el mejor destino, mi lugar, el mejor destino, o mejor lugar, eu destino. Gracias, nos vemos el lunes próximo con un conversatorio, el número 13, donde nos acompañará Paul Bali de la compañía Gaining Niche, quienes manejan The Best Cities a nivel global. Los esperamos el próximo lunes. Gracias a Liam, gracias a Aurea, quienes nos acompañaron con la traducción. Hasta el próximo lunes. Muchas gracias. Nos vemos.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Silvana. Bye-bye. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Gracias.
A todos.
Gracias.